presidential race will be on November 6th of this year. He's on the ballot, and we're going to have an up or down vote. Do you back Trump's program, okay, with all its good and all its bad? Do you back Trump's program, or do you back removing him? Because that's what Pelosi and Tom Steyer and these guys want.
The president's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, putting a very real political spin on the simmering culture wars that percolated this week. For Trump to succeed, it's about us versus them in politics and in pop culture. And my panel is with me now. Senator Santorum, you know, the president is really adept at using culture wars to his advantage. I mean, he started out with being sort of the birther guy, right? So do you think that this is a strategy that could actually work in November?
Well, I think the White House is very concerned about the base. They look at the election results in my home state of Pennsylvania, my old district of Pennsylvania, and the fact is that voter turnout in a lot of Trump areas has been very low among Republicans, and they're looking to try to gin up the base by saying this is really about the guy that you voted for, not about these Republicans who aren't necessarily doing a great job in cooperating with President Trump and getting some things done. So, yeah, I think that's the motivation. Look, the Republicans still have a chance between now and the election to do some things that can motivate the base. One is health care, which, as you know, I've been working on for quite some time. I think there's still an opportunity to repeal and replace Obamacare. They need to show something more than just having passed a tax cut to energize the base. And if they don't do that, then they're left with, you know, just trying to gin them up, saying, no, this is about Donald Trump. I'm not sure that's enough.
And then the flip side, Bakari, the whole notion that Bannon was talking about of trying to lay out the election as you're either for Trump or for impeachment, that's not necessarily a great message for Democrats.
No, but this race will be about, as much as Democrats are talking about issues every single day, they're talking about the fact that trade wars aren't good for America, the fact that we need to make sure that we strengthen up our healthcare system. The fact still remains that this race is going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. Midterm elections are referendums on Donald Trump. Even more importantly, these culture wars, they actually help gin up our base as well, because our base doesn't look at these necessarily as culture wars as much as they are dog whistles. And when you have things like the Roseanne Barr incident or the football players or all of these things, then you realize that there is a string of racism and xenophobia and bigotry that Democrats in their base want to beat back as well. And so it's a double-edged sword for Donald Trump. He actually played it well in 2016. I think people will push that back in 2018.
Well, his son, Donald Trump Jr., was on Breitbart Radio this week, and he talked about the double standard that he and many conservatives say that they see between discussing Roseanne Barr and some things that liberals say about the president and his family. Listen to what Donald Trump Jr. said.
It's such a flagrant double standard that I think real Americans get it. They're no longer buying this notion that, oh, it's fair on both sides.
You agree?
I absolutely agree, and that's maybe the first time I've ever agreed with Donald Trump Jr. on anything. I mean, the fact is, the culture war works to the benefit of Republicans. It's been doing it for 50 years.
Does that make it right?
No, it doesn't make it right, but I have to tell you, liberals walk right into the trap when they have a Samantha Bee out there, not just using the most vile, vulgar word to describe a woman, but going after her in such a personal way, going after her relationship with her father. Look, I have not a whole lot of use for Ivanka Trump. I don't think she should be in the White House. But you don't go after somebody in that kind of really nasty, vile way, in a way that, frankly, I think that word and the fact that it was scripted and, you know, essentially she may have read it from a teleprompter, says a world about liberals and their values.
Walking right into it.
But here's the problem. You have the president himself who has used that word. It's been reported that he used the C word to describe Sally Yates. I mean, here's the thing. It is really bizarre and wild that the president makes himself a victim and him and his administration make him a victim. When he is a bully in chief, he uses the bully pulpit to attack. He goes after women of color, he and his administration. They go after Latinos and immigrants, calling them animals, conflating MS-13 to immigrants, to refugees, people who are looking for asylum, which we should be giving them asylum. And this is what is happening, is that the president has opened up this kind of Racism was here before Donald Trump, and sadly it will be here after Donald Trump.
Amen.
So that is the fact. But what he's done is he has normalized. He's given license to people to make it okay to say, hey, all right, you want to put out your racism even loud and be public about it? Go ahead, because he's doing it. And that is the problem that we're in with this cultural war, is because it's coming from the White House.
What do you say to that, Senator?
Well, I disagree with some of the examples that were given by Karine. The reality is that this president uses crude words and acts crudely sometimes. And I think most Americans, even Republicans, have problems with that. And we see Democrats who do the same thing. I think most Americans have the mind that they really hate this crude behavior, the coarsening of the discourse in our society. And at the same time, most Americans want to allow people to sort of, particularly comedians, to say what they want to say and be edgy, and even the president and others to sort of, be real and be out there. And so there's this two minds, and it tends to fall out is that, well, if it's the Republican that doesn't, I'll take the, and I'm a Republican, then I'll sort of give them some slack saying, well, we want them to be able to say what they want to say. And if it's a Democrat, well, then they condemn. And that's the problem here, is that there are two minds, and people can sort of fall into whatever camp they want based on on who says it.
I'm a mom and I'm a grandmother. And when my kids used to say, well, so-and-so did it, well, David did it, or Rudy did it, or Pablo did it, so it's okay for me to do it. I used to say, no, it's not okay. And that's the problem here, is that that both sides are acting like children. And this is really, I think, disgusting, and it is devaluing our culture. I think it is making us a worse place to live.
I
agree with that.
Can we talk about just the pure hypocrisy and irony of Donald Trump Jr. just for a moment? Because, what Samantha Bee said is beyond the pale. You wouldn't want anyone to talk about your daughter, sister, or mother that way, and it should not be talked about, even in comedy. What Roseanne Barr said was not comedy. It's the First Amendment right. She also has the consequence of that First Amendment right, because you just can't be racist today because you feel like you want to be racist in public. So we have all of these things, but it starts and stops in one place, and that's the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go back to Access Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, the same way you don't want Samantha Bee talking about Ivanka Trump that way, the words that came out of Donald Trump's mouth on that bus, you don't want anybody talking about your daughter.
So we're talking about, understandably, the current resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But Kareem, President Obama said something, according to a new book by his former advisor, Ben Rhodes, that really is interesting, because it's really about this whole notion of a culture war. He said the following: maybe we push too far. Maybe people just want to fall back into their tribe. Sometimes I wonder whether I was 10 or 20 years too early. You worked for him. He's talking about culture. He's talking about identity politics. Do you agree?
I can understand that President Obama is now reflecting, especially what we've seen in the last 2 years. Look, when I was in the White House the first 2 years, I worked on both elections, and what we saw was pretty horrific. You elect the first black president, and there was an uproar. You saw the Tea Party. You saw the obstruction by Republicans time and time again. And I would say that we swung. We elect the first black president, and then we swung and elected Donald Trump. And it is kind of problematic. There is something it says a lot about this country. And what Donald Trump did is he tapped into it, because let's not forget, he started his political career talking about birtherism, being the spokesperson of birtherism. And so he saw something as well and tapped into that racism that we have been seeing for the last, in particular, very heavily so in the last 10 years. And so this is where we are. And he's taking that. Donald Trump is taking that, and he ran with it. And let's not forget how he capped off his first year. He saw neo-Nazis marching in Charlotte, and what did he say? There are fine people on both sides. This is the president of the United States that we're talking about.
What's being ignored here is the role that Barack Obama played in all this. I mean, you just can't go from, well, we elected our first black president, and all of a sudden we get Donald Trump. There was something in between those two things.
No, I'm saying that we tapped in. Clearly, it tapped into something in this country.
The thing that tapped
when
into
we elected the first black
was that many people
which is
saw
the racism.
Barack Obama being just that, doing more to exacerbate racism in this country
How?
than any.
What did he do?
Every time there was a controversy where someone of color was involved, he took the side many times against the police, against
when
people. He did it
people
over and over
treated
and over again.
unjustifiably
President Obama was. To many people out there,
you're talking about Trayvon Martin? Is that what you're talking about? Who he came out and said this was wrong? A young boy who was shot.
Guys, this breaks my heart. This breaks my heart to say this because this is an important discussion, and I hope you'll continue it online or on Twitter, and certainly the next time we have you.
We're going to end up with the Obama was racist.
Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Thank you. And coming up, Fareed Zakaria goes one-on-one with Steve Bannon. That's next.